Vaping has been a hot topic in the media recently. The recent coverage has been related to the recent outbreak of cases which are suspected to be vape-related lung injuries to individuals across the United States. US health officials have stated that there are now 530 confirmed and probable cases of lung injury, with 7 deaths due to severe lung-related illnesses, all of this tied to vaping. Currently, there are no signs that the outbreak is easing. Just a week ago, the number of cases reported was only 380, meaning that there were about 150 more cases reported just last week. 3/4 of the cases are male, 2/3 are between the ages of 18 and 34. According to the Center of Disease Control and Prevention, the 7 deaths are reported in California, Illinois, Indiana, Kansas, Minnesota, and Oregon.
I'm Aditi Roy. The Centers for Disease Control has just come out with a new update on the mysterious lung illnesses that appears to be related to vaping. The agency says it is now investigating about 530 cases of this illness. That's up from the 380 that it said it was investigating last week. There are 7 deaths associated with this as well across 38 states now and 1 territory. They still don't have a cause for this, but a lot of the focus has been on e-cigarettes.
In this video, I will be covering what we do know about vaping and e-cigarettes. I will be examining recent medical literature to determine the adverse effects on health and how you should be approaching vaping and family members who vape. Since vaping is relatively new, there hasn't been enough time for comprehensive medical data to be accumulated. However, we do have evidence that vaping can be dangerous. Vaping has grown in popularity with the rise of e-cigarettes, which were introduced to the mass market in the United States in 2007. Vaping devices include not just e-cigarettes, but also vape pens and advanced personalized vaporizers, which are known as MOTS. Vaping is the act of inhaling and exhaling the aerosol, which is referred to as vapor, which is produced by an e-cigarette or a similar device. The term is used because e-cigarettes do not produce tobacco smoke, but rather they produce the aerosol, which contains fine particles. Many of these particles contain varying amounts of toxic chemicals which have been linked to cancer, as well as lung and heart disease. I will cover these compounds later on in the video. Generally, a vaping device consists of a mouthpiece, a battery, a cartridge for containing the e-liquid, and a heating component for the device that is powered by a battery. When the device is used, the battery heats up the heating component, which then turns the contents of the e-liquid into the aerosol. This aerosol is then inhaled into the lungs of the user. The e-liquid and vaporizer products usually contains a propylene glycol or vegetable glycerin-based liquid with nicotine, flavoring, and other chemicals and metals. E-liquid does not contain any tobacco. Some people also use these devices to vape THC or synthetic drugs like flakka instead of nicotine. The newest and most popular vaping product is the Juul, which is a small, sleek device that resembles a computer USB flash drive. Its subtle design makes it easy to hide, which explains why it has been so popular amongst high school students. It now accounts for about 72% of the market share of vaping products in the United States. The e-liquids come in several flavors like creme brulee, mango, and fruit medley. Every Juul product contains a high amount of nicotine. One pod or flavor cartridge contains the same amount of nicotine as a whole pack of cigarettes. Nicotine is an extremely addictive substance and is the reason many people who smoke cigarettes are unable to quit. Therefore, vaping is highly addictive. Generally, the Juul device costs between $35 to $50, and a package of 4 Juul pods costs about $16. At $4 per pod, the pods are a bargain compared to a pack of cigarettes, which costs more than $10 per pack. Although it is illegal for anyone under the age of 18 to purchase e-cigarettes or other tobacco products, underage teenagers are still finding ways to get their hands on them. Since Juul is amazingly discreet and looks just like a flash drive, it is easy for teenagers to hide them at school or at home. According to the FDA, a recent report from the CDC found that e-cigarette use rose from 1.5% to 16% among high school students from 2011 to 2015. Currently, up to 20% of high school students vape or have vaped, and 3% of adults have vaped or have vaped. More than 2 million high school students used e-cigarettes in 2016.
Butters, are you selling vapes? Well, sure. What you looking for? I've got strawberry, vanilla, tropical passion. What? Tropical passion. It's like mango and kiwi.
Butters, you understand this stuff is an epidemic at our school?
Yeah, and at $5 a pop, we're gonna be rich.
3 reasons e-cigarettes may be particularly enticing for young people are: first, many teenagers believe that vaping is less harmful than smoking. Second, e-cigarettes have a lower per-use cost than traditional cigarettes. Finally, vaping cartridges are often formulated with flavorings such as apple pie and watermelon that appeal to younger users. On September 6, 2019, the New England Journal of Medicine published a report by Layton et al. They reported a cluster of cases from Illinois and Wisconsin in which patients presented with acute severe respiratory distress after using e-cigarette vaping products. These patients basically had symptoms of lung failure, meaning they could not breathe correctly. These patients who reported use of e-cigarette devices and related products in the last 90 days before symptom onset. These patients had pulmonary infiltrates on their chest x-ray, and their illness was not caused by anything else. Pulmonary infiltrates is a fancy way to describe the chest x-ray of an individual and is basically saying that they have serious lung inflammation. So if someone with lung inflammation without a known cause had been vaping sometime in the last 90 days, they were included in this report. In this report, there were a total of 53 patients, 83% of whom were male, and the median age of the patients being 19 years old. This means that the patients with the symptoms were predominantly young teenagers, who, as stated before, are the most avid users of vaping products currently. The majority of patients had a variety of symptoms. 98% had respiratory symptoms, 81% had gastrointestinal symptoms, and 100% of them had constitutional symptoms. Respiratory symptoms are associated with conditions that involve the lungs. These are things like cough, shortness of breath, and wheezing. Gastrointestinal symptoms are associated with digestion and are things like nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. Finally, constitutional symptoms are general body symptoms, which are fever, fatigue, and night sweats. After a thorough examination, there was no found cause for these symptoms. However, all of these cases had a relation to vaping in the past 90 days. This is quite a peculiar situation because these patients had gastrointestinal and constitutional symptoms which you would not typically associate with vaping, since the only thing involved with smoking is usually the lungs. Furthermore, all of these patients had bilateral infiltrates on chest imaging, which means there was severe inflammation occurring in both lungs. Let's take a look at one of these patients' chest x-rays and compare it to a normal one. On the left side of the screen, I have displayed an image of a normal chest x-ray. These dark regions here are the lungs. All of the structures you see as white on this image are bones, so these lines here are ribs. On the right side, you will see the chest x-ray from one of these patients I previously described who had experienced these symptoms from vaping. As you can see, the lung fields have changed and are now covered with these white patches on both sides. These white patches are indicative of severe inflammation. Of the 53 patients who vaped, a total of 94% of the patients were hospitalized. 32 underwent mechanical ventilation, which is when a ventilator controls your breathing for you, and 1 death was reported. In these patients, there was very non-specific varieties of lung inflammation patterns, so nothing specific was able to be identified. What is clear is that the lung problems seem to be due to acute toxic lung injury due to a particular compound. This means that some kind of foreign particle is causing the inflammation in the lungs of these patients. With vaping being the common factor with these patients, we can deduce that something in the vapor is causing these life-threatening symptoms. E-cigarette fluids have been shown to contain at least 6 groups of potentially toxic compounds. Nicotine, carbonyls, volatile organic compounds such as benzene and toluene, as well as ultrafine particles and trace metal elements. Furthermore, about 80% of the people who vaped and became ill have reported using both nicotine products and THC or CBD products. The most common THC product that was reported was marketed under the label Dank Vape. It's possible that when these compounds are superheated by the vaping device, their chemical structure is altered, which could be introducing a new toxic chemical to the individual's lungs. When you inhale the vaporized gas from the vape, the tiny particles and metals can travel deep into your lungs. The damage is possibly caused because your immune system then reacts to these foreign particles and causes the inflammation and damage to the lungs. However, the exact mechanism of the lung injury is not yet known, and more scientific analysis is necessary to precisely determine how the damage is occurring. At this moment, we cannot determine how these 6 toxic compounds of e-liquid and their relation to THC and nicotine cause the inflammation in these patients. However, we can assume that one or a combination of them is the culprit of the lung injury. Research into the health effects of vaping is ongoing, and it may take some time before we get a definitive answer to the long-term risks of vaping. What we do know is that millions of young teenagers are trying vaping. It has become a social trend and something they feel they must do in order to be cool. Among youth, e-cigarettes are more popular than traditional smoking products. In 2015, the US Surgeon General reported that e-cigarette use among high school students had increased by 900%. It's good that less young adults are turning to cigarettes in 2019. However, we still don't know the long-term ramifications of vaping. Both youth and adults appeal to the lack of smoke. With no smell, e-cigarettes reduce the stigma of smoking. However, what is most concerning about the rise of vaping is that people who would have never smoked otherwise, especially youth, are taking up the habit. It's one thing if you converted from cigarette smoking to vaping as a way to try to quit smoking. It's quite another thing to start up nicotine use with vaping. Youth nicotine use can lead to addiction and traditional smoking down the line. According to the CDC, the Center of Disease Control and Prevention, until we know more, if you are concerned about these specific health risks, they recommend that you consider refraining from use of e-cigarette or vaping products.